Alrighty, it's time for Vlogmas 23. That's right. Um, just about 2 days left until Christmas. We'll call it New Christmas because I'm vlogging all the way throughout the full Christmas. And there's two Christmases. There's New Christmas on the 25th because it's not the original Christmas. It's not when the 25th wasn't the Christmas when Christ was born. The actual day was there, but with a different calendar. So the actual day, which way back when, the December 5th, way back when, falls on January 7th. So this 25th, the new 25th, which was basically really fully came into play for the world around the 1800s. This is the new Christmas coming up on the 25th, and we have the old Christmas coming up on January 7th, and then after that we have the 12 days of Christmas. So we're going to be vlogging and vlogmas all the way throughout. So we're going to have vlogmas until basically the 19th of January. And for those of you who love Christmas, can't get enough of Christmas, this is your place to get it because we're the only ones who are doing this. I'm pretty sure that we're the only ones who are going to have old Christmas, New Christmas, Old Christmas, and 12 days of Christmas, all included in Vlogmas. So, you can have your Christmas fun here. Get out your Santa hat, keep it out until January 19th. Keep your decorations up until January 19th. You can have your fun with that. But that being said, I was just finished watching Geek Charming, the Disney Channel movie, and the bizarre thing is that my life when I left high school and decided I wanted to become a physicist, a natural physicist, and for those of you who maybe a little bit confused, an astrophysicist is not an astrologer. I don't tell fortunes by the star. I use basically probability to determine how someone's life is probably going to turn out. Because we all have behaviors, and these behaviors have patterns, and you can see people who are where they are now in life in terms of as an older person, and you look at where they were, and the type of person they were, the personality they had, and you can fit people into different types. And you can say, this type of person goes here, this type of person goes here. You can sort of generally give a path to a person in terms of where they might end up in life and how they might perceive life. But you can't give specifics on it. In other words, it stays general but doesn't get more specific doesn't get any more specific than the generality. So you can get an idea, and then from that idea, you can sort of say, well, once you have that knowledge, you can sort of change your life around. And so that's what I say. It was watching Geek Charming, thinking about the girl Nicole who sent me the email, left me the message on the Facebook, the Physics TV Facebook page, talking about love and whether or not she'll find true love. The problem is that, and this is where I need to come in with a qualifier, and the qualifier is it sort of gives you the information you need to know about myself and why I'm qualified or how I'm qualified to answer this question. And what you're going to get is something that most people won't tell you. Most people sit inside the box. They sit inside of a very specific definition. I don't. And that's because as I began my research career more than 20 years ago, I ended up going down a path that sort of brought me back to high school. And before that, basically, if you want to calculate my age in terms of where I am, in terms of my peer grouping and so on and so forth, my lifestyle is more like a tween than anything else. So, yeah, watching Geek Charming, I watch all the kids shows, well, what adults call kids shows, anyways, and that's kind of where I'm situated. And then for anything else that's quote unquote more mature, more adult oriented, I go into documentaries. I don't go into dramas and so on and so forth. Even science fiction now is kind of passe for me because science fiction is great when you're sort of going up into science And that's where you want to go. Once you're in science, you're actually doing the research, and you're pushing the boundaries of science. Then science fiction no longer holds the fascination that it once did, because rather than watching what you're seeing, rather than watching what you're seeing on the screen in terms of the story and the science behind it, you're actually doing the science. You're pushing the boundaries. You're looking for these new ideas, these sort of, uh, the things that will push the next generation of science fiction. In other words, you're doing the science that will push the next generation of science fiction. So, there's no need for the fiction anymore because you're really doing it. Other than that, how I got into this whole probability business about behavior science is uh, how did I start? It, well, when I always loved the zoo. I always like going to the zoo, and you always like watching the gorillas and all the different animals. You watch to see how they behave and so on and so forth. So I started doing that. I started going to the zoo on a regular basis. I started watching the animals and watching the behavior, taking notes. And for some reason, I just started turning around and watching the crowd watch the apes and watch the other animals. And it was really interesting to see how human beings behaved in response to the animals behind their particular enclosure, behind their particular cages. And so I took that a bit further and began observing people. And the best place I went to observe people was in the mall or some other public place. You find a spot that allows you to see everything going on, a sort of a corner spot, and you can see everything that's going on, and you can sit down and you can now study the people in their what we call their natural habitat. And as you start taking notes, as you start watching, who particular people are, you go back into your yearbook, you think about the different people you met in high school, and so on and so forth. You think about the type of people they are, and you can sort of get an idea of who was who were the jocks, who were the popular people, who were in one particular crowd. And as you start watching this and seeing the stuff play over and over again, because that's what it does. Every generation that comes to the school, every kid who comes to the school thinks they have experiences that their parents haven't had, and that's not necessarily the case. The parents have had the experience. It's the same thing over and over again, generation after generation. Just the way bullying was an issue today, it was an issue back then. So it's gone through generations of this, and so you can now have an observable pattern in terms of behavior as to how people go from where they were in school into their normal lives, and see kind of how that sort of the social dynamics in school evolves into the larger social dynamics of the world, which we call the real world, where you're out, amongst the work world, and your employment office becomes your new social environment. That many of the I would say much, if not most, of the dynamics that you have in school play out in the workforce, and it basically high school, the social dynamics in school and high school continue on into university, into if you choose a career college, something like that, and into your workforce. In other words, it follows you for life. The environment changes, the conditions change, and where you are on the social ladder changes, but the overall dynamic doesn't change. And so you can, if you were a person who observes people, can sort of spot this out, and and you can sort of see how people evolve into where they are today. So you can go from young to old and see how people fall down a particular behavioral path. And now that this is where you can talk about pattern behavior. And if anyone knows about the TV show Criminal Minds, where they have the behavioral analysis unit, this falls into that particular pattern too. This particular concept of studying and looking for pattern behavior that will allow you to predict if someone's going to become a criminal or not, or do something horrific. Now, they haven't gotten to the point yet where their observations were good enough that they can actually go in and prevent a crime, that still pretty much, I would say, uh, it's the Daffy Duck approach to detective. Most detective series on TVs, the crime series on TV, follow the Daffy Duck approach, where you slap people around for most of the show, and at the absolute last minute, you find the real culprits. And that, if you ever watched the old Bugs Bunny, that's what happens with Daffy Duck. Daffy Duck always did these detective series in his thing, and Daffy Duck as as Sherlock Holmes and so on and so forth, always got it wrong. And so he went around from person to person in the room, slapping everyone around, getting it completely wrong, and then at the end stumbling on the right person. So this is kind of this is where the detective series has gone, and you'll see that things that are old and things that are new are not necessarily that far apart, and that just because something is older doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't and can't provide an example for something that is newer or younger, and that's sort of where this sits here. I took this sort of a step further. I spent 6 years on the streets of Toronto working with the homeless who have serious mental health issues. And so you can see where things, in terms of the extremes of particular issues, when you're talking about suicide and the victims of bullying, you can sort of see where the extremes are going, where things may be heading. And if you can talk to a person in the right manner, you can actually change their life, because you can sort of highlight them. You can sort of warn them, put up warning flags of various different deviations or changes in their road, their path of life, that will cause them to go off what their perceived path is or their hopeful path is, and onto this alternate path of mental illness, and that's the homelessness and so on and so forth. And that includes drug addiction, alcohol addiction, and all the other things that go along with it. That being said, it is, as I said, high school stays the way it is for the rest of your life. The conditions may change, the standards of popularity may change, but the overall dynamic doesn't change. And so that's what I'm going to do tomorrow for Christmas, because I'm not going to go into this too long, is that rather than being a future teller, a fortune teller, I'm going to leave this for tomorrow and get more into some of the dynamics of why someone doesn't necessarily. If you're asking the question, am I going to be lonely when I get older? That's not necessarily the case, and I will demonstrate these dynamics tomorrow. And this is sort of where I come off like more of like a Sheldon on Big Bang Theory, because I do have an overarching knowledge of things, and it's basically from the perspective came at it from the perspective that astrophysics is supposed to be the pinnacle of all science. It's at the top of all science, and that all science, because astrophysics is the open exploration of the universe and everything within the universe, that all other subjects sit within the structure of astrophysics. So this is how I get into all these different areas, and this is how my view on science overlaps with basically Sheldon Cooper. But I'm not really a theorist. I'm more of an observer and an experimentalist, and that's what Leonard Hofstadter is. Leonard is an experimentalist in terms of being a physicist. So Sheldon is a theorist, and Leonard is a experimentalist, and I kind of sit between the two. Anyway, that's about it for Vlogmas 23. I will leave the rest for Vlogmas of what I'm going to say for Vlogmas 24. And I want to thank, once again, Nicole. Thank you for your input on the Facebook page for Physics TV. If any of you out there have any questions you want to ask me, feel free. I will, give you a shout out. I'm not going to say your full name. I'm not going to give you the embarrassment of identifying you specifically, but I will give you a general shout out, and you can say, "Hey, that's me." Anyways, Merry Christmas, and there's a lot more Christmas to come. Have a nice day.